Tactics evolve constantly because one manager does something new and another manager finds a way to break it. It's cyclical. But this season, 5 trends are about to take over and they could redefine how teams attack, defend and press at the elite level. But before I tell you what I think those are, we need to work out what it is managers are actually reacting to right now. Because the predominant tactical trend of last season was hybrid man-to-man marking. Bournemouth, Brighton, Arsenal, teams lower down, teams in Europe, they're all pressing in this kind of 4-2-4 shape. And hybrid pressing means they're mostly in a zonal shape, but when the ball goes, say, this side, suddenly they all have triggers and they all try and make runs to block the pass back to the goalie. Other players step up, they leave their positions, they go and try and mark all of these. This is what they do. They step up, leave their positions, and now there's no options to pass, and so they end up losing the ball. That's what this hybrid press is. It depends on where the ball goes, everyone reacts, that's what's happening everywhere. And the other trends then are just a bunch of reactive things that relate directly to that. Moving players out of position, false nines, inverted wing backs, everything is happening to try and create space for others to be able to move the ball forward because of how prevalent this marking system has become. And with more teams pressing man-to-man, space is becoming harder than ever to find. So how are the elite teams finding it? Well, I'll tell you, because things are changing. Which brings me to our first new tactical trend, and that is touchline attacking fullbacks. Now, you might think you've seen these before many times, and you'd be correct, but there are some subtle differences that are interesting as to why these are becoming prevalent. And you can tell they're becoming prevalent because managers like Pep Guardiola are recruiting specifically for this reason. They brought in Ait-Nouri, who is a very attacking fullback. They're after someone like Tino Livramento at the right back. They've got Matheus Nunes converted to this position here. But other teams have done it too, specifically Liverpool. They've brought in Milos Kerkez and Jeremy Frimpong, both very attacking, especially Frimpong, who will often see attack in these really advanced areas, hugging touchline wide. And it'll have a knock-on effect to everything else. But the reason that Guardiola is doing it is especially interesting, because we're seeing an evolved version of this Man City team. So when they're in the final third now, what you're often getting is lots of these tidy number 10 types quite close together. Now, in the past, you've had wingers who stay out wide to hold the width, but now you're getting the width held by these guys. It means you can bunch a lot of players close together, which means close combinations, lots of tight 1-2s, which Guardiola likes, but it means also if the ball turns loose, you've got more players close together to pounce on them. But you're also seeing this divide because of this shape, where you're effectively creating a back kind of 3 and a forward 6 or 7. But it is all to do with these fullbacks. This is what you get now, which you haven't had in the past. But it's not just attacking touchline fullbacks that we're seeing. What we are now also seeing is the rise of a new position entirely, one I'm going to coin the roaming fullback. There may already be a word for it. I don't care. I'm calling it the roaming fullback, free fullback, whatever you think you should call it, put it in the comments, maybe it'll become a thing. You never know. But I'm specifically referring to players like Marc Cucurella. Now, as Tom Jones famously said, it's not unusual to see a fullback in this position. So we've seen this before, but Cucurella is one of these players that is advancing the role because he's getting really far forward up the pitch. As you can see, this position here, then eventually what happens is Chelsea build on the right-hand side. He is here to score. But why is this interesting? It's because if you're playing against a hybrid press or a man-marking system, if you're the fullback, oftentimes you're the one who can move up the pitch freely, because who's going to mark the fullback? Is it the right winger? Is the right winger going to track this player all the way back? Who picks him up? You can see he's basically a spare man here, and this is what we keep seeing with fullbacks. Here it is another game. This is PSG now in the Champions League, in the Champions League final actually. So what you have here are your 2 touchline players, your wingers. One of them is a winger, Kvaratskhelia. One of them is the fullback, who's a roaming fullback. That is Achraf Hakimi. You see the other fullback is back here, which is another thing we see quite a lot of at the moment. But what happens is that Hakimi is the one who finishes off the move by ending up again as the extra spare man in this system. Because if everyone's being man-marked, how do you find the spare man? You move someone there, and the player that people are moving the most at the moment and will go forward next season seems to be the roaming fullback. And loads of teams are doing this if they have the kind of player that can do that. Jeremy Frimpong might be it for Liverpool. Josko Gvardiol was doing it for Man City a little while ago, which is when he started scoring all those goals in the Premier League and in the Champions League. But that brings us on nicely to our third new tactical trend, and that is split strikers and the high box. So what I mean by this is, here we have Man City with the width created by 2 touchline fullbacks, something they started doing last season, rather than using wingers on the outside. And this is interesting because it means you can play 2 central forwards. You've kind of got a 4-2-4, but they're not playing 2 wingers as part of the 4-2-4, it's your fullbacks, because the other 2 attacking players that are in wide areas are actually deeper. So you're forming this box. Now the box shape we've seen for a little while now has been a 3-box-3. So the box would actually be something like this. This would be where your box is. But By moving this beyond the pressing line, what City are effectively doing is opening up new passing lanes. They've got loads of players behind the press. And again, it forces the opposition to have questions. Do they pull everyone back to mark these, or do they hold a certain shape? And the two strikers up here give you even more options as well, because as you go forward, what then happens is you end up having an overload in these last lines. So you have 4 forwards in the last line. And when you start moving players out wide, as Gundogan's moved out wide, suddenly you can have a roaming fullback getting in behind causes trouble, because now you've got a player having to chase him. You've got one of your interior midfielders, who's also a winger at the same time, making runs inside. The striker can go, someone else can go inside. You're effectively overloading and dragging players out of the way to create more opportunities that maybe weren't there in the first place. And it's all to do with manipulating these marking systems. And that brings me on nicely to our 4th tactical trend, and that is fluid back 3 systems. I'm going to use Real Madrid as an example of this because we weren't sure how Xabi Alonso would line them up, but what we're starting to see is Tchouaméni playing as part of a back 3. Now obviously he can step forward if he wants to in this kind of fluid movement, but it means that Huijsen can pass the ball forward, Rudiger can carry the ball forward. We're seeing this a lot with centre backs because when you move them like this, you're creating space in other ways, but they're playing touchline fullbacks. So you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold who can get forward and play up here. If he goes forward, this one tends to stay a bit deeper, but it also means you then have 2 midfielders who drop into this shape between the 3, and Bellingham can effectively roam from side to side and create movements like this. But I think we'll see this fluid back 3 system in a lot of different teams, specifically to try and drag players out of position because of the hybrid marking systems that they're playing against them. So I'm going to use Arsenal's example now. If you imagine for me, this is Martin Zubimendi, you have the ball here, you can be marked here. So what they might do, I think, is maybe you'll have the same kind of general shape they've had for a long time, a 4-3-3, but you can suddenly push the left back even further up, something like this, and what you might get is Ben White overlaps or something, but Zubimendi will start forming 3s by moving into deeper positions, either left or right, to try and drag players with him, because again, that will open up more positions. And this is something that Granit Xhaka was doing for a while. Again, it's nothing new, it's all cyclical, but because teams are pressing with the front 2, and a lot of teams are playing with the front 2 because of the way they want to get everyone bunched together and have wide fullbacks, playing a 3, having a +1 at the back makes absolute sense. So I think in certain situations, maybe not from the default from the team lineup, but you'll see this quite a lot in a lot of different teams. Now those are 4 trends I think you might see next season, but the 5th one is my favourite and one I'm pretty convinced you will see teams try to do all of the time. And to show you it, I'm going to go back to one of the most important goals of last season, and that was, of course, PSG's goal in the Champions League against Arsenal at the Emirates. Now, what happens in this goal? Let's have a little look. Nuno Mendes has the ball here. He finds Dembele with a lovely ball inside. He has loads of space, counter-attacks through the middle, plays it out wide, Kvaratskhelia cuts inside, plays it back to Dembele. It's a really nice goal, and this is what it looks like. But the important thing is this exact line, this one. That's the one you want to look at. And the reason that's important is because they've manufactured this exact line, because they've done this goal a couple of times. Here it is again. This is against Liverpool, the same line that they've done here. And to work out why they're doing this and what this means, we have to go back even earlier in the goal to look back at it. And here we are, ever so slightly further back. Now, player on the ball is highlighted. As you can see, Arsenal are tight. They're really tight to everyone. Everyone's got a job. Everyone's going to be tight here. That's what they're doing. They're making sure that PSG don't have the ball. It's kind of forcing it backwards. That's what the press does. And so when the ball does go backwards, when he has to play it this way, what they're going to do instantly is jump on it. These are all going to go straight away, man to man, making sure no one's spare, so PSG can't play it out. They're going to try and win the ball high up the pitch. Really hard to escape. And bang, here they go. They're going for it right now. They're racing towards the ball, trying to win it back, closing everyone down. But here's the trick. PSG are doing this on purpose. This is all a trap. They're trying to lead them into this. Now you'll see Vitinha and Fabian Ruiz are trying to move out the way. And the reason they're trying to do that is because by dragging Arsenal out of the way, out of the middle of the pitch, they are able to free up space for another pass. Because this trend that you're going to see is emptying the middle of the pitch by dragging man markers away to free up these exact long diagonal passes into someone like Dembele. Because once you do that, once you drag the man marking system apart, you suddenly got a player in all the space who can run forward. And then what we start seeing are even more of the trends. So for example, we see the width. You've got 2 touchline players, that's nothing new, but you've got one is the roaming fullback, you've got one is the outside winger, but what you also technically have are split strikers. Now all of this then turns into this ball here, because Dembele can turn inside, and because they're trying to mark man to man, Fabian Ruiz can run across, drag a marker away, frees up the ball out wide, Kvaratskhelia can run towards goal, take on his man, cut it back, and Dembele scores. But the whole thing has come from that essential diagonal pass. Lots of small passes to work the space, bait them into the trap, set the trap and spring it. And that's how they managed to get away with that. That's how they managed to do it against Liverpool as well. And that's how Man City scored this goal against Al Ain. What you can see clearly is they've left the middle completely open. There's no one in here. I think of Guardiola teams, you always think they're going to have players there to bounce passes off or just hold position. But they don't. And they've done it because they have that bunch of players behind the first line of press and dragging markers out of the way to free up this specific diagonal pass. Now, Bernardo Silva wins it. You've got an outside fullback making the run to try and free up the space and overlap. Again, nothing new, but kind of things you're seeing quite a lot now. And what this means, all the space have opened up, is that Gundogan can run into this space unmarked because no one's seen him. He's on the blind side of everyone to arrive, to crash the box, to score a goal in that game. But it's not just Man City. We're starting to see this all over the place. And here is an example again. Chelsea playing against Palmeiras in the Club World Cup again. So what we see here, things we talked about, the fluid back three. Either of these could go. Cucurella could go up and become a roaming fullback at any minute. And you also have players dropping in from midfield to try and offer a pass. But you can see clearly, again, there's no one in this space here. They're dragging players out wide to free up the middle. And in this game, Palmeiras didn't really know what to do with Chelsea because they were having so many different rotations in the midfield and they were moving the ball to different positions. They weren't sure how to mark them. Their pressing structure just didn't work in the first half at all. And so what we ended up having was Chalobah, centre-back, moving forward into space. No one knows who to cover because they don't know where they're meant to be. And you can see that, you can see the tension. The players don't know who's meant to go and close him down. Eventually, this player steps out to do that, but that only frees up this exact diagonal pass that they want to be able to play, this exact one, which means Cole Palmer can turn and score the goal. But we also see in this exact moment, they're basically split strikers because Delap runs across to free the space for him. And what we can also see in this situation is a roaming fullback. That's Malo Gusto, who's not playing wide in the touchline. He's roaming somewhere else to take another player away with him to free up this kind of opportunity. And these are all the kind of things we're seeing. And what I actually think we'll see all through the next season is a mix of all of these things in the same game. We'll see different mixes. We'll see an attacking fullback. We'll see a touchline fullback. We'll see someone on the last line. We'll see a back three and then a back two. It will change entirely depending on what the opposition is doing. And they will also adjust their pressing structure depending on what that team is doing. Because as we already know, tactics are cyclical. One person comes up with something new, another one tries to break it. And that's what everyone's going to try and do. New stuff, break it. That's tactics.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence, and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.